What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel as you tune in and you check out the content. And with that being said, man, I want to react to some statements that James Harden made about loyalty, right, in basketball. Um, so now I think a reporter asked him the question about loyalty because of James Harden moving around from team to team, and where does loyalty come in at, right? And so I think people pretty much split down the middle when it comes to loyalty. They kind of see like, well, okay, if the owners don't have any loyalty, then why should the players have loyalty, right? And some people are looking at it from that standpoint. So the statements that James Harden made really didn't didn't upset them or make them feel a kind of way about it, right? And I'm kind of the same way. But my thing is not loyalty to the owners, but loyalty to yourself as an athlete, you know, and make the best of your situation as an athlete and maximize like the talents that you have as an athlete, right? And that's where I think where the question comes in, right? Because I think, in my opinion, in order to be the best athlete or the best basketball player that you can be, you have to establish a home base, right? And then when you establish that home base, you just take and you make the best of that situation. I think when you move from team to team, and that's where the question comes in. When you move in from team to team because this situation wasn't right or that situation wasn't right, you're constantly starting over. And so if you're constantly starting over, you don't get to focus on improving your game. You just take you take whatever skill set you have, and you just try to take and match that to your new situation. Whereas though if you stay in one situation, then you can focus on growing and getting better. It's the same thing with like with a job, like if you have a job and you constantly moving from job to job to job, there's no opportunity for you to advance. You have a certain skill set and you'll work this job for a couple years and then you'll work the next job for a couple years, but you don't get the chance to advance and mature within that company because you're always moving from job to job, right? And I think that as a basketball player, that reflects, right, certain skills that somebody like Kobe Bryant may have developed because he stayed in one city for his entire career. James Harden wouldn't have the opportunity to develop like that because he constantly moved around and he started over. Um, like Isaiah Thomas stayed in Detroit for his entire career, and that means that Isaiah Thomas was able to overcome the hurdles and the pitfalls and grow from those experiences, and that made Isaiah Thomas a better player. Same thing with Magic Johnson. Like he stayed his whole. I think it's something to be said when you stick a situation out, even in personal relationships, like people who bounce around from relationship to relationship, marriage to marriage, they don't get the opportunity to grow and mature and overcome certain situations. Like if a situation get hard or a situation get, where as though you don't want to deal with it, then you just move on to the next person. And that don't help your growth. They don't help your maturity, right? And so James Harden didn't, I think, in my opinion, because he moved around from team to team, didn't get the opportunity to grow and mature as a basketball player, you know, um, the same way somebody who would have stuck it out in one city and grew, So I just wanted to say that before I played um, what Rob Parker from the Odd Couple and his co-hosts are going to say about James Harden's his statements.
There was a big trade that happened last week before the deadline. It involved none other than Monty's favorite player on the formerly Los Angeles Clippers, James Harden, got dealt to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And James, they've been pretty good since he's got there. They're scoring pretty at a high clip, and he's distributing the ball. Jared Allen looks great catching lobs from James Harden. He played his first home game for the Cavs earlier this week. And after the game, he was asked about the idea of loyalty because he's bounced around from team to team over the last few years. And his answer raised some eyebrows. Take a listen.
And the whole quote unquote loyalty thing is, I think it's overrated. I think this is a business at the end of the day, and it's a lot of money involved, and a lot of decisions that has to be made. You know what I mean? So, like, if a player isn't producing, or if you don't see him in the future, or front office, some of them have to do like a job and want to keep their job. So they gotta feel like they got to do what's best for to keep their job, and they trade players. Or if a guy isn't happy and he wants to be traded to somewhere else, then it's a problem. It's just so many different dynamics that go into it. This is a business at the end of the day. So, like, not even just NBA, but like people that have normal jobs have those same problems. It's just not magnified.
Uh, can I say?
All right, so you heard what James Harden said, right? And like I said earlier, like you have to look at it like if he's just looking at it from the financial part of it, right? But even if you stay in a situation sometimes and you grow from that situation, or you never know how a situation is going to develop if you try to stick it out. And he just, you kind of stunt your own growth, and you got to look at it from a selfish point of view. Like, you can't always look at it from about the money, especially if you want to grow and you want to get better.
This? Yeah. James Harden, maybe it's because you guys want to play too long. There used to be the loyalty thing. People played 12 or 13 years, and they played for one team. Isaiah Thomas played for the Pistons, right? Joe Dumars played his whole 14 years there. There are situations like that. Michael Jordan played. He did go to the Bulls after they didn't want to bring back Phil Jackson. Okay. But the idea that someone is supposed to hold on to you for now, guys are playing 17, 18. Tom Brady played till he was 45, and they're supposed to hold on to you, pay you all this money, and in a lot of cases, these guys aren't even the face of the team or not the best player anymore. So I get it when you talk about the loyalty factor, but I also understand the business part of it. You can't hold on to people too long. We talk about the Celtics all the time. What did they do? They held on to Larry Bird, held on to Robert Parrish, held on to Kevin McHale. They didn't trade any of those guys. And guess what happened? They went 20 years without winning a championship.
I don't have a problem though. Like if the team hold on to Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale and Larry Bird, I don't have an issue with that, right? My thing is, when you have a player like James Harden who's been in the league for almost 20 years, and then he's not the player that he was, early in his career. And so and this with basketball, like I would prefer, in my opinion, I would prefer to have Larry Bird for 13 years, giving me everything he got, than to have James Harden for 20 years just there, like for the money. It's like one guy, you get a different type of performance from a mercenary than you do from somebody who is like somebody who is actually entrenched into that city, entrenched into that team. Like it's a whole different situation. Like you can't compare Larry Bird, holding on to Larry Bird, you know, to holding on to James Harden. Larry Bird, he was all about Boston. He was all about the Celtics. So was Kevin McHale, all about the Celtics, Robert Parrish. So if you hold on to those guys, uh, you know, those guys gave you championships and they did things that was, you knew that they had the team best interest at heart, even though they may not have been the same players that they were early in their careers, but they still, they can pass down their knowledge and their wisdom to younger Boston Celtics players, right? So that's different from the James Harden situation. James Harden looking at it just, he looking at it almost like a mercenary would. He's not entrenched or connected to no specific organization, right? And so owner can be like that. A owner, because the owners don't, owners have the liberty. They are kind of like buffered from that. You can't fire the owner. and the owners, they just worried about the bottom line. So they have the luxury of being able to look at it from that standpoint. But if you're a basketball player and you just want to be seen as a mercenary, then that's cool. That's what you take. So I don't have an issue. I just think that, like I said, as a fan, you get a different performance from somebody who is really like Tom Brady all in on the Patriots. So you get a different type of performance and a different type of mindset from those guys. And fans really, they really generate to those kind of guys.
Because they couldn't turn it over.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just saying, like, even in those guys, they were loyal to him. They didn't play 20 years, 18 years. And I've seen some loyalty. The Yankees, Derek Jeter played 20 years in the Bronx. 20 years. That's a long time. But I'm not mad at teams or owners who make a business decision after a guy's playing that many years. That's all I'm saying. Like, if you played 12 or something years and you only wanted to play for a team, Tim Duncan, he didn't go anywhere.
No.
He played his entire career. So to say that there's no loyalty, I don't buy that. There is loyalty, but it has.
And see, with Tim Duncan and the Spurs, he right. Like, Tim Duncan played his entire career with the Spurs. And that fan base loved Tim Duncan, and Tim Duncan loved that fan base and that organization, right? And so they can always, like, the organization can always capitalize on a relationship that they had with Tim Duncan. And Tim Duncan can always capitalize on a relationship that he have with that organization. If Tim Duncan, I don't know what if he worked for them or what, but if Tim Duncan ever needed money or needed a job, he could go back to that organization. And if that organization ever needed to, if they fell on hard times and they needed a situation where they needed to promote the old school basketball team and the old school way of doing things as a Spur, and they could bring, they can dust Tim Duncan off and bring him back. So the relationship is something that benefit the player and the organization, depending on how you handle that relationship, right? But James Harden won't have that luxury after his career. Like who do we go back to? Do we go back to the Clippers? Do we go back to the Rockets? Do we go back to OKC? Because those fan bases and those organizations, they just see him as a mercenary. And so that's when things like that, again, that'll be another downfall, or another, not a pro but a con to the situation of moving from team to team.
Fit in with the team and where you are. Even Tim Duncan took a step back, right? He wasn't. It was about Tony Parker. It was about Kawhi Leonard. He was still on it.
That's the key part, right?
He was still there, but he wasn't. He wasn't the highest paid. He wasn't the face, right? The new face of the organization.
So you said
Steph is still in New Orleans. Steph is still.
You led me to where I'm going. I get his sentiment. I do believe things have changed. I do believe athletes, and by the way, I'm talking 15, 16-year-old athletes, are brand-minded because kids can get NIL, kids are aware, kids have YouTube brands, kids come into college already stars because they got mixtapes and everything on YouTube. So Rob G, how long they been telling me Mikey Williams is about to be the next guy in college?
See, yeah, and so now you have kids who coming in who concerned about their brand, right? But the thing is, though, if you're concerned about your brand, you still got to put that work in. It still pays off to have some type of loyalty to you, right? You as a mercenary, like, mercenaries don't have brands. Like, Isaiah Thomas got a brand, Larry Bird got a brand, that they can always capitalize on. Michael Jordan got a brand, Kobe Bryant got a brand, and that's because they put all their work in with one team. James Harden, he has a brand, but it won't be like those other guys, But had he stayed in one team, he'd have had a connection, to one fan base, and you can always tap into that fan base. You can always tap into that organization, but he don't have that one. His fan base is fractured, and so if you fracture, you don't have as much leverage as somebody who has like Isaiah Thomas is always connected to the Detroit Pistons, and that fan base, man, they love him in Detroit, so that, in my opinion, is one of the cons of moving around from team to team. And if you make your money up front, like, you know, James Harden has got his money up front, but on the back end, if he ever need to go to an organization, then you know I want to see how that's going to play out. So that's my take on the situation. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave a comment, and I'm gonna check you all out in the next video. Peace.